They say the Rowan family's house in East Belfast still hums at night. If you stand outside number 15 Ardenlee Avenue after midnight, you can hear what the police wrote in their report 70 years ago. A woman's voice, faint, coming from the pipes. The Rowan family really lived there. The house still exists, and on June 21, 1953, they disappeared. All that was left behind was a typewriter, a Bible, and a note that said, "Do not let the women sing." The Rowan family were ordinary. Patrick Rowan worked at Harland and Wolff, the old shipyard near Queen's Island. Bridget, his wife, sang soprano in the choir at St. Malachy's Church. Their two daughters, Eileen, 14, and Una, 10, went to St. Joseph's Primary School. June 21, 1953, was a Sunday, the longest day of that year. At 11:14 a.m., they attended Mass. At 1:25 p.m., they were seen walking home down Ardenlee Avenue, carrying a loaf of bread and a tin of condensed milk from McNally's corner shop. And at 2:15, neighbors heard something, not screaming, not breaking glass, but singing. A hymn, a woman's voice. It came from inside the Rowan house, then suddenly stopped. By evening, the windows were shut, curtains drawn. The next morning, milk bottles still sat on the doorstep. And by Tuesday, when police finally entered, the family was gone. June 23, 1953, police forced entry into 15 Ardenlee Avenue. The front door was locked from the inside. The door chain was still fastened. Inside, everything was in place. Shoes neatly lined, dishes washed, beds made. But the air was heavy, warm, and metallic. In the kitchen, a kettle burned dry on the stove. On the table, a Bible, open to Judges 11, where Jephthah sacrifices his daughter to keep a vow. In the front room, a Remington typewriter, a single line still inked in the roller, "Do not let the women sing." Police thought it was a suicide note, but there were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no forced exit. In the hallway coat closet, they found something strange, a Polaroid photograph, glossy, undeveloped around the edges. The image, a little girl standing beside a metal pipe. Time-stamped in purple ink, 21 June 1953, 14:17, written faintly on the back. "We heard her in the pipes. The house stayed empty for 40 years. Neighbors moved, but stories didn't. People said you could hear singing in the plumbing. A man who replaced the water lines in 1962 claimed the house breathed through the walls. Council workers refused to stay inside after dark. By the early 1990s, Belfast was changing. The city was healing after years of violence. And that's when Lila Hart, a 32-year-old Canadian documentary filmmaker, came to Belfast. She wasn't hunting ghosts. She was researching trauma, how communities turn loss into folklore. At the Ulster Museum archives, she found the Rowan case file. 3 photos, 1 report, and the same typed sentence, "Do not let the women sing." She wrote in her journal that night, dated October 12, 1994, "It doesn't read like a myth. It reads like evidence." 4 days later, October 18, 1994, she got permission from the Belfast City Council Property Office to enter the old Rowan house. It stood exactly as it had, peeling paint, garden overgrown, and those same stained curtains. Inside, everything felt preserved. The typewriter was still there on a wooden desk. The Bible still open, same passage. And upstairs the air changed. Colder, damper, like the smell of old coins. Lila recorded everything on a Sony TCM 5000 cassette recorder. You can still hear her voice, calm at first, then quieter, entering the girl's bedroom. There's a cassette tape on the floor. The handwritten label says, "Rowan Girls Sing 1953. That's impossible. She was right. Cassette tapes didn't exist in 1953. She bagged the tape, sealed it, and left. That was 1647, October 18th. The recording she made that night is still in the BBC archives. Her voice is steady, but you can hear the tremor when she hits play. It starts with a static, faint child's voice counting. 1, 2, 3, then a woman humming. The sound is hollow, like it's traveling through water. At the 54-second mark, another voice interrupts, whispering, not above, under. She stops the tape, rewinds, and plays it again. Same voice, same whisper. But now the radiator in her room starts to click, 3 times. She laughs nervously into the recorder. Belfast plumbing, right? When she listens again, There's something new layered under her own voice. Soft, childlike, almost gentle. We heard her in the pipes. That's where she stops the tape. The next morning, Lila found the only surviving neighbor, May Kearns, 82, living near Craiga Road. May remembered Bridget Rowan clearly. She had a voice that could calm the whole parish. But she said the pipes in that house hummed back at her when she sang. I told her stop, but she said, "That's the problem, May. I already did." May showed Lila a church hymnal. Inside the cover, Bridget's name written in blue ink. Bridget Rowan, Easter, 1952. And underlined in red pencil beneath the hymn, "Come thou fount of every blessing. Tune my heart to sing thy grace," May said softly. She should have left that line alone. On October 23, 1994, Lila stayed up to duplicate the mysterious tape. She placed her flashlight beside her diner coffee mug, hit record, and started the transfer. At 23:11, the chain on her door rattled. At 23:12, her floorboards darkened, wet, though it hadn't rained. And at 12:54 on the duplicate copy, the same voice returned, not above, under. Then another, older, broken, almost begging, "Do not let the women sing." And then, nothing. When she lifted her flashlight, the coat closet door was open. Inside, damp wallpaper, and faint rhythmic tapping from beneath the floorboards. She whispered, "And it's on tape, if she's under the floor." Then the recorder clicks off. The next day, October 24th, she filed a minor disturbance report at the Botanic RUC substation. The officer noted she was exhausted from overwork. No follow-up. That same night, the residents downstairs heard a single thud from her room, like a chair falling over. But no one checked. Lila's last journal entry reads, "Going back to Ardenlee tomorrow." The voice said, "Under. I need to see what's beneath." She never wrote again. When her footage was restored years later, technicians enhanced the final 3 seconds of audio. Under the static, multiple female voices whisper, overlapping, breathy, repeating the same 4 words, "Under the floor. Under the floor," and then one single note, high, human, held just long enough to make the waveform distort. After that, silence. The Ardenlee house was demolished in 2001, but residents say that if you walk that street on a humid summer night, you can still hear a woman humming from somewhere underground. When the Rowan house was reopened in October 1994, it was supposed to be for a one-day inspection, just photographs, paperwork, and closure. But what happened next made even the investigators stop talking about it. Every recording from that week, every camera, every tape, captured the same sound. 3 taps, then 2, like someone under the floor, answering October 25th, 1994. The rain had eased by morning. The city smelled like diesel and damp brick. Lila Hart parked her rented Vauxhall Astra on Ardenlee Avenue, engine ticking as it cooled. She left a note on her dashboard, "BBC permit, researcher, L. Hart." Her camera bag was heavier than usual, flashlight, crowbar, gloves, 2 fresh cassettes. Inside her jacket pocket, she kept the Rowan Girls Sing tape, rewound and sealed in a Ziploc. The voice had said under. She wanted to see what was beneath the house. Inside, again. At 10:42 a.m., she stepped inside 15 Ardenlee. The lock had rusted, but the door gave way with one shove. Everything was colder now, like the air had stopped moving since her last visit. Dust floated like mist. The faint smell of iron returned, metallic, wet, alive. She started her recorder. October 25th, returning to site. Objective, check floorboards, coat closet. Temperature reading, 12 degrees Celsius, colder than outside. She moved slowly through the front room, past the typewriter, its keys still depressed, as though someone had leaned on them recently. In the coat closet, she traced her flashlight beam along the skirting board. The floor beneath the coats was soft, hollow. Her crowbar bit into the wood with a creak. The sound echoed strangely, not into dirt, into space. Under the board was a dark cavity, maybe half a meter deep. A faint draft rose from it. And then, the tapping, 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. Exactly the pattern that had been haunting her at night. She froze. The recorder caught her whisper, "If you can hear me, do that again." Silence. Then, 3 taps. 2. She dropped the crowbar. Later that afternoon, she met a maintenance worker named Declan Boyd, outside the property office on Adelaide Street. He'd done repair jobs on Ardenlee years ago. She recorded him on a handheld microphone at a small cafe called Café Renoir near Queen's University. Aye, that place. No one wanted it, Declan said, stirring sugar into his tea. Pipes sang when you drained them, and if you knocked on the walls, they'd knock back. Council thought it was an echo, but it wasn't. Lila asked if he'd ever heard anyone singing. He looked up sharply. Once, in the middle of winter, I was alone in the back room. Clear as day, a woman humming. Same hymn they use for funerals. He didn't finish his tea. He didn't take payment either. That evening, back in her rental flat on Botanic Avenue, Lila made a duplicate of the original Rowan tape. This time, recording the playback through a second recorder to isolate background sounds. The log reads, Start 2104, white noise constant. At 12:31, faint second voice, older female. At 12:54, same whisper, clearer, not above, under. At 01:06, unverified whisper, possible child, knock once for no. She replayed that line 5 times. It didn't sound like a question. It sounded like an instruction. Her phone rang, an old beige rotary model, provided by the landlady. When she picked up, the line was silent except for a low hum. Then faintly 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. The call ended itself. On October 26th, she returned to St. Malachy's Church to speak again with the parish clerk, May Kearns, who had helped her before. May led her into the back vestry, where old baptism and marriage books were kept. I checked the register, May said, running her hand along the spines. Patrick and Bridget married here in 1938. Eileen christened in 39. Una in 43. May hesitated before pulling one more book from the shelf, the funeral record ledger. There's no entry for them, none. But there's something else. Inside, on the page dated June 22nd, 1953, someone had written, in blue fountain pen, a single phrase. Women's voices are silenced as promised. No name, no initials. Just that. May looked pale. I don't think Father O'Hara wrote that, she whispered. He couldn't type, let alone this. When Lila looked up from her notes, May was still staring at the empty church aisle. You know, she said softly. The girls used to practice in the basement laundry. The pipes carried the sound right up into the sanctuary. She paused. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear them. That night, Lila checked into a small highway motel near Lisburn, away from the city. She wanted distance from the pipes, from the flat, from whatever was following her. At 22:37, she recorded a message for her producer back in London. I think the voice on the tape is Bridget Rowan, or Eileen. There's something physical in that house. Under it, I'm going back tomorrow with Declan. We'll lift the boards properly. She ended the tape with a deep sigh. In the silence that followed, a faint woman's voice whispered into the microphone. Soft, like breath against glass. We said don't. The timestamp on that audio is 22:38:11. Lila had already stopped recording. It rained again. The kind that mutes the whole city. Lila met Declan at the house at 10:15 a.m. He brought a portable light and gloves. They pried up the boards properly this time. Underneath was a crawl space, just wide enough to slide into. The dirt was dry, packed hard, lined with old lead pipes that ran toward the back of the house. Declan lowered his flashlight first. Something glinted, glass maybe. Then the smell hit them. Old water, rust, and something faintly sweet. She recorded from above. October 27th. We've exposed a small cavity under the front hallway. Metal piping visible. One object partially buried. Possibly glass. Declan reached in and pulled out a child's hairbrush. Wood handle. Initials carved in. E.R. Eileen Rowan. Lila said nothing. She just kept recording. At 10:48, as she leaned closer to the crawl space, her microphone caught a distant sound. A voice, singing, faint from the pipes. The same hymn May had mentioned. Come, thou fount of every blessing. Declan dropped the flashlight. Jesus, did you hear that? The beam swung and landed on the dirt wall. For a moment, they both saw it. Handprints. Small, overlapping, pressed into the soil that evening. Declan filed a short incident note with the Belfast Council office. Conducted inspection of council property at 15 Ardenlee with BBC researchers. Found child's brush and marks consistent with human handprints. Left site due to unease and strong odor of stagnant water. Will not return. He refused to talk to her again. When she called his house that night, his wife answered and said he'd taken the car and gone to stay with his brother in Bangor. "He says the house isn't right," she told Lila. "He says you brought something out with you." Back in her flat, Lila couldn't sleep. The sound started again. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. She hit a record. The microphone picked up the taps perfectly, as if they were being made right next to her bed frame. "It's happening again," she whispered. "If you're trying to tell me something, I can hear you." Silence. Then one long, slow knock, and a voice, faint but real, through the recorder mic. "Knock once, for no." The light in her room flickered. Her flashlight on the desk switched itself on. The beam landed on the wall above the radiator, and there, in the condensation, were 2 small handprints. She didn't move for nearly a minute. Her breathing grew faster on the tape. Then, almost inaudible, "I'm not alone." The tape runs another 3 minutes before cutting off. At 8:17 a.m., October 28, 1994, the downstairs tenant knocked on her door. No answer. He waited an hour before calling the landlady. By 09:45, police entered the room. Everything was neat. Camera equipment stacked, coffee mug washed, bed made. The cassette recorder was still on the desk, tape ejected. On the wall above the radiator, condensation still wet, someone had written with a fingertip, "Under the floor." Weeks later, BBC engineers reviewing Lila's tapes noticed a pattern. Every time the voice said "under," the background hum shifted frequency, matching the resonance of water pipes under old Belfast housing estates. When mapped out, the hum formed a near-perfect line toward Strangford Lough, about 15 miles east, the same body of water where local legend claimed the Rowan women once drowned a secret they couldn't carry. None of this was ever broadcast. Her producer pulled the documentary before the final cut, citing distress to the surviving family. The tapes were placed in a sealed archive box marked Heart, pending verification, stored at the BBC's Ardenlee Avenue office. But 2 years later, when the box was reopened for transfer, the recordings were gone. All that remained was an empty cassette case and a typed sheet of paper. In the center of the page, "Do not let the women sing," same alignment. Same typeface, same Remington font used in 1953. Residents still avoid that stretch of Ardenlee Avenue after dark. When asked why, they say it's the pipes. Even after the house was demolished in 2001, new buildings on the same line report the same thing, faint humming in the plumbing, usually around 11:11 p.m. A plumber who worked there in 2014 said the pipes vibrated like a woman's throat trying to sing. And if you listen closely, on quiet nights, when the city's asleep, you can still hear the pattern. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, knock once for no. When investigators re-examined the Rowan case in early November 1994, they thought they were just verifying a missing person story. What they found instead, sealed behind plaster and decades of silence, suggested that the Rowans never left the house at all. Every trace of them was still there, under the walls, waiting to be heard. November 1st, 1994. It had been 4 days since anyone last saw Lila Hart. Her apartment on Botanic Avenue was sealed by police. Her equipment and field logs were transferred to the BBC office on Ardenlee Avenue for cataloging. The network assigned a new producer, James Delaney, 39, to review the material. He'd worked war documentaries in Sarajevo, a rational man, grounded, methodical. He wasn't expecting what he heard. At 09:12 a.m., he played the last of Lila's cassettes through studio headphones. The room filled with her voice, calm and focused. Then came the knocks, 3, pause, 2, followed by a child's whisper, "Knock once for no." Delaney stopped the tape. He looked up at his assistant. "Where did she record this?" "Ardenlee Avenue," she said. "Council property. Same address as the 1953 case. By noon, he'd signed out the site key from the property office. November 2nd in 1994, 14:30. The street was half empty, winter coming early. Delaney arrived with a small BBC film crew, cameraman Paul Kent, sound engineer Sarah Lennox, and a local fixer named Declan Boyd, the same Declan who'd helped Lila days before. He didn't look well. When Delaney offered his hand, Declan didn't shake it. "You shouldn't have come back here," he said. The house was unlocked. The chain dangled loose. Inside, the air was colder than outside again, 11 degrees. Paul started filming. The footage would later show dust motes drifting like ash. The beam of the flashlight shaking as the camera adjusted. Delaney, on camera, November 2nd, 1994, investigating 15 Ardenlee Avenue, site of the 1953 Rowan disappearance and the recent missing person report involving BBC researcher Lila Hart. They moved through the hall, past the Remington typewriter, its ribbon still dark, the paper blank. The coat closet door was open. Delaney crouched, his torch sweeping across the cavity Lila had opened. She said there was something under the floor. Sarah whispered. Then let's find it, he replied. They widened the opening, prying up more boards. Beneath was a crawl space lined in cracked plaster and old lead piping. The air smelled of earth and damp metal. Delaney climbed halfway down, his camera light flickering. He called out, "Anything down there, Paul?" Paul aimed his flashlight deeper into the cavity. It caught something smooth, curved, like plaster, but the wrong color. Declan stepped back. "Stop, don't touch that." "Why?" Delaney asked. "Because I already did once." He knelt, trembling, and pointed toward a section of wall behind the pipes. There, beneath the dust, was faint lettering scratched into the plaster. They brushed it clean. It read, Bridget Rowan, 1953, and below it, smaller, written in pencil, "Do not let them sing." Declan's flashlight beam shook. That wall wasn't solid when we found it years ago. It sounded hollow, like something's behind it. Delaney ran a hand along the plaster. It gave slightly, like a drum skin. He signaled Paul. "Camera rolling?" Paul nodded. Declan's crowbar went in with a single hit. The wall cracked and cold air poured out, the smell of stagnant water and mildew. Behind the plaster was a narrow tunnel, barely shoulder width, descending at a slope. Sarah gagged. "It smells like something rotting." Paul steadied the light. The tunnel was lined with wallpaper, the same floral pattern as the girl's bedroom. But the paper ran inward, as if the room had been folded and buried. At the base of the tunnel, something glinted. Glass. They crawled inside one by one, their breaths echoing. There were 6 glass jars, sealed with wax, lined along a wooden beam. Each jar contained something pale. Cloth, maybe. Delaney knelt, brushing off grime. The label on one jar was still legible, E. Rowan. Another read, Una, and a third, Bridget. Inside each jar floated a small paper square. Paul's camera zoomed in. The paper was typed, 1 line per note. Jar 1, she sang in the pipes. Jar 2, we heard her answer. Jar 3, under the floor, we remain. Sarah dropped her recorder. Jesus Christ. "Are those—" "Don't say it," Declan interrupted. Delaney's voice was quiet on tape. "We're sealing this room. No one touches these." They backed out slowly. That night, Delaney met May Kearns at St. Malachy's. The old woman looked even paler than before, as if she'd been waiting for him. "You found them, didn't you?" she asked. "Found what?" "The jars." He didn't answer. May clasped her rosary. "Bridget came here the day before she vanished. She said she'd done something terrible, trapped the voices. She said her grandmother told her that the Rowan women were cursed to carry songs that wake the dead. If they stopped singing, the silence would take them. If they kept singing, something else would." Delaney leaned closer. "And what did she do?" "She sealed the hymn in glass. Buried it under her own house. That was her mistake." May's eyes filled. "You can't silence what's already inside the pipes." On November 3rd, Delaney and Sarah returned to the BBC studio to review the new footage. The camera audio was full of static, but under the static, the same pattern. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, then faint singing, female voices layered, echoing through metal. And finally, a line that froze them both. "You opened it!" Sarah ripped off her headphones. "That wasn't on site," Delaney rewound. The same voice, softer. "You opened it." That was when the studio lights flickered, every one of them, and a sharp metallic sound came from the ceiling pipes. That night, Declan phoned Delaney's office. His voice was shaking. "They're back in the pipes. I hear them in my flat. The same pattern, 3 and 2. My wife says it's the radiators, but it's not. You need to burn whatever you find." Before Delaney could answer, the line went dead. The call trace showed it disconnected at 23:11. The exact minute Lila's final recording had ended. Delaney returned to Ardenlee one last time on November 4th alone. He left the BBC van parked 2 streets over, walked in with just a flashlight and his tape recorder. The police report from that night describes what he said in his own words. Recovered from his recorder. Found later near the house foundation. Entering at 22:58. The house smells worse tonight, like stagnant water. Floor cavity open. I'm hearing faint tapping again. He crawled down into the tunnel. The jars were still there, but one was missing. Empty space, wax flakes scattered. A drop of water hit his wrist. Then another. He looked up. Moisture running down from a pipe seam, the metal vibrating. Then, a voice. Do not let the women sing. It came from inside the pipe. Not playback, not echo. A voice moving through the metal, using the air. Delaney whispered into his recorder. Who's there? Silence. Then a child's answer, soft and distant. Una. The tape cuts there for 8 seconds. White noise. When it resumes, his breathing is fast, panicked. The walls closing, the plasters. Then, nothing. Police arrived the next morning after a neighbor reported strange noises overnight. Like singing through the drains. They found the house empty. Delaney's flashlight lay near the hole. No sign of him. Behind the wall, they discovered the missing jar, shattered. Inside the wax residue was a small object. The missing Polaroid from 1953. The same image. A girl by a pipe. Timestamped 21 June 1953, 14:17. But now, her eyes were closed. Belfast City Council ordered the property sealed permanently. A report dated November 6, 1994 reads, due to hazardous conditions, the structure was deemed unsafe. Site to remain locked pending demolition order. But the demolition didn't happen until 2001. For 7 years, the house stood empty. Neighbors reported flickering lights, sounds of water running through no supply lines, and, most often, singing. The same hymn every time, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. In 1998, a BBC intern reviewing archived boxes found an unmarked cassette inside the heart, pending verification file. On the spine, written in faint pencil, November 4th. The first 40 seconds were blank. Then, breathing. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. A voice, Delaney's, this isn't a room. It's a mouth. Another voice, female, whispering behind him. Sing. Then static. Deafening. Endless, like rushing water. When it finally stops, you can hear something faint beneath it, like children humming. The intern turned off the player and walked out of the archive room. She never came back to work. Today, the site of 15 Ardenlee Avenue is a row of modern flats. The residents say the plumbing works fine, except sometimes in heavy rain when the drains whistle like a distant choir. Maintenance records show the same complaint written every winter since 2002, pipes humming. Cannot locate source. And every note is timestamped the same way. 23:11 p.m. If you walk that street at night, listen closely near the gutters. You'll hear water moving, slow and steady. And sometimes, beneath it, a woman's voice singing through metal. Tune my heart to sing thy grace. And just when the melody starts to fade, there it is again. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. Knock once for no. Knock twice for yes. And pray you never hear an answer. By November 1994, the Rowan house was sealed again, its crawl space boarded, its records boxed. But closing a door doesn't end a haunting. Within days of the last investigation, the same sound began to travel through Belfast's pipes, from sinks, from drains, from the river itself. And everyone who heard it said the same thing. It was singing. November 6, 1994, St. George's Market. On a Sunday morning, vendors were setting up stalls inside St. George's Market, a few blocks from the River Lagan. The rain outside beat against the glass roof. Fishmongers were filling their basins when one shouted, "Turn that radio off!" There was no radio. The sound came from the drain in the floor, a faint woman's voice, humming the hymn Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Within minutes, 3 people confirmed it. When council inspectors arrived later, the voice was gone, replaced by the smell of rust and a slow, rhythmic tapping echoing through the plumbing. 3 taps, pause, 2. That was the first public report since the Ardenlee case had closed. At the BBC building, Producer James Delaney's office sat dark. He'd been missing 4 days. Technicians cataloging his tapes began to experience odd malfunctions. Recorders switching on by themselves, reels running backward. Sound engineer Sarah Lennox logged the issues. November 7th, 09 to 12. Magnetic interference during playback of Heart 03. Audible hum increases at 23 Hz. Plumbing resonance. Staff report nausea. She transferred the audio to digital to preserve it, then went home early, exhausted. That night, in her flat near Stranmillis Road, she turned on her kitchen tap. Instead of water, the pipes exhaled, a long, low note, like a human breath forced through metal. She shut it off, heart hammering. At 23:11, her phone rang, static. Then, not above, under, November 8th, 1994. A burst main flooded several basements along Ardenlee Avenue after midnight. Witnesses said the water came fast, black, oily, smelling of iron. Council teams arrived by morning, pumping out cellars. One worker, Colin Reed, told the Belfast Telegraph, "It wasn't rainwater. It was warm, like bathwater, and you could hear, I don't know, a tune in it. The hoses vibrated like someone singing through them." When reporters contacted the water service, officials denied any music in the lines. Privately, the foreman filed a short note. Flow contained. Source unknown. Sound frequency, Tarsh 210 Hz. Approx female alto voice. Sarah couldn't sleep. She recorded a voice memo on November 9th at 01:42 a.m. "I keep hearing water in the walls. Every sink, every pipe. The hymn's getting louder. I think it's trying to finish the line that Bridget never sang." She paused. You can hear her swallow, whispering to herself, "Maybe the house isn't haunted. Maybe Belfast is." At 01:44, the recording captures another sound. 3 taps, pause, 2, coming not from her room, but from the pipe behind her. Then, a faint child's voice. "You opened it." The memo ends with the splash of water hitting the floor. By sunrise, the River Lagan had risen a full half-meter overnight. No rainfall recorded. Rowers training near the Queen's Bridge reported hearing singing under the arches. Local man Patrick Duffy, 54, told RTE News, "It was a choir, no question. But underwater. You could feel it in your ribs, not your ears." Hydrology data later confirmed acoustic vibrations along the entire length of the river, peaking at 210 Hz, the same frequency logged by the water crew. An emergency meeting convened at BBC Northern Ireland headquarters, 11 November 1994. Present, 2 senior producers, the technical manager and consultant Dr. Elspeth Cairns, an acoustic physicist from Queen's University Belfast. Dr. Cairns listened to the tapes and said quietly, "These aren't mechanical faults. They're resonant signatures. The human larynx, when humming, produces the same pattern. It's not the pipes echoing. It's something vocal moving through them." When asked if it could be faked, she shook her head. "You'd need air pressure." Which means breath. Despite the council order, Sarah returned to Ardenlee with a borrowed Sony VX1000 camera on November 12, 1994. Rain soaked the street. The house stood dark behind metal fencing. She climbed through a gap and entered with a flashlight. Footage recovered later shows her walking through ankle-deep water pooling across the floor. Her voice trembles. The main burst again. Water's coming from the wall, not the pipes. She kneels by the crawl space Lila had opened. Water seeps out in pulses, every beat matching the 3-2 rhythm. She points the camera down. For a moment, there's only blackness. Then, faintly, a reflection moves, the outline of a woman's face under the surface. Eyes closed, lips forming the shape of a hymn. Sarah gasps, steps back, slips, the camera spinning. We hear her whisper, "Bridget." Then rushing water drowns her voice. The tape ends. Her car was found outside the property 2 hours later, engine still warm. She was never seen again. November 13, 1994. Council engineer Thomas Leary filed a report after pumping operations. Significant groundwater present beneath the foundation. Source not identified. Structural cavity discovered leading under adjacent properties. Found multiple jars of glass debris, burned, melted. Detected continuous vibration, approx 210 Hz. At the bottom, in smaller handwriting, he added, "Sound resembles singing. Recommend immediate closure." Leary retired the next week. 2 days later, A receptionist at St. Malachy's parish office received a call from an unlisted number at 23:11 p.m. The line carried only water noise. Then a woman's voice. "Tell May we forgave her." The next morning, May Kearns collapsed during choir practice. Her final words, according to another parishioner, were, "They're under the floor." On November 16th, heavy rain returned. That night, the old sewers beneath Ormeau Road overflowed, flooding part of the BBC archive basement. Security footage, time-stamped 23:12, shows the water rising fast and then pausing unnaturally at knee height before reversing direction. The guard said it felt like the flood inhaled. When staff entered the next morning, the box labeled Heart, pending verification, was gone. In its place was a single cassette tape, half-melted. Label, The Rowan Family, 1953. Playback produced 8 seconds of humming, one wet gasp, then silence. Dr. Cairns isolated the frequencies. Each hum matched the vowel range of Bridget Rowan's recorded choir performance from 1952, an archived 78 RPM acetate the church still held. Her notes read, "Acoustic fingerprint identical. Same singer. Temporal discrepancy, 41 years, impossible." She left Belfast a month later, citing stress-related illness. Her students said she'd started sleeping with the taps turned off and towels stuffed into every drain. On November 20th, record rain hit the city. At 23:11, surveillance cameras along the Lagan captured water rising, smooth and fast, breaking its banks without wind. Audio from a Riverside pub's CCTV picked up a faint chorus, women's voices overlapping, the same four-word refrain. "Under the floor we remain." Minutes later, the sound cut. The water fell back to normal levels. No structural damage recorded, but the next morning, every manhole cover along Ardenlee Avenue was open, water dripping upward against gravity. By December, the council demolished what remained of 15 Ardenlee. The site was filled with concrete and repiped. No human remains ever found. Yet in the years that followed, residents in the new flats filed dozens of maintenance complaints. Pipes humming after midnight. Children say they hear singing in the bathroom drain, knocking on radiators, 3 and 2. Plumbers replaced every line in 2003, but the reports never stopped. In 2008, BBC Archives digitized the remaining tapes. One reel, marked simply Ardenlee Flood, contained field audio recorded during the 1994 pumping operation. At 4 minutes 32 seconds under machinery noise, you can hear it. A woman's voice, clear and close, singing through water. "Tune my heart to sing thy grace." Then multiple voices join, female, overlapping, layered in echo, until it becomes unbearable. And at the very end, a single whisper, almost tender. "Do not let the women sing." The frequency graph spikes, then the reel melts from heat. Engineers shut the system down. If you walk Ardenlee Avenue now, it looks ordinary. Brick apartments, parked cars, neat hedges. But locals say when rain hits the gutters, it sounds like voices washing through the pipes. Council workers refuse late-night maintenance calls. One new resident, Anna McCourt, described it in a 2021 interview. "It starts as water pressure. Then it changes, like someone humming right beneath you. My little girl said there's a lady singing in the sink. I told her that's just old pipes, but sometimes the song ends before the tap's turned off." The Rowan story was never broadcast. The BBC officially listed it as incomplete investigation, unverified source. But inside the archive, the staff still hear it, a faint hum through the heating ducts late at night. It travels floor to floor, always pausing outside the sound editing suites. One engineer tried to record it last winter. His notes end with the words 23:11, pipes vibrating. Hearing women's voices. Recording failed. The room is filled with condensation. Sounds like singing underwater. If you listen hard enough, you might catch it too. A low hymn moving through your walls, not above, under. Every haunting hides a pattern, and every pattern points to a truth. By late November 1994, Belfast's engineers, priests, and broadcasters had one thing in common. They all heard the same music. It wasn't in the air. It was in the city's plumbing, a melody rising from beneath the concrete. The same hymn Bridget Rowan sang the day she vanished. And the deeper they searched for an explanation, the closer they came to uncovering what the Rowan women had done to silence it. November 23, 1994, Queen's University, Belfast. Dr. Elspeth Cairns. The acoustic physicist who'd analyzed the earlier tapes returned to Belfast after 2 weeks away. She requested permission to test a section of the city's old cast-iron mains that had once fed Ardenlee Avenue. The council gave her 3 hours. She placed contact microphones along the exposed pipe under University Road, feeding the signal into an oscilloscope. At 2311, as she adjusted the gain, the waveform surged without warning. The scope drew a perfect sine wave, steady, deliberate. And then, through her headphones, came a voice she recognized. Soft, breathy Irish soprano. Come thou fount of every blessing. Elspeth's logbook records a single line written in trembling script. Frequency matches Bridget Rowan's voice print. Impossible, but real. She pulled off the headphones and vomited onto the lab floor. The following morning, a letter arrived at BBC Ormeau Avenue, addressed to James Delaney, producer, deceased file. No return address. Inside, 3 photographs, identical Polaroids of the Ardenlee living room, except the curtains were missing and the wallpaper looked wet. Each photo had a handwritten note across the bottom edge. It was never a curse. It was a promise. The letter itself contained only one typed line. If they sing again, Belfast drowns. Police confirmed the typeface was the same Remington font as the original 1953 note. But the carbon ink was fresh. Elspeth's interview, a documentary transcript dated November 24th, captures Elspeth Cairns explaining her discovery to a BBC technician. Elspeth, the frequency isn't random. It carries modulation, like a code built from a hymn. The pipes act as a recorder. They don't replay sound. They preserve it. Decades of vibration stored in metal. Technician, so what are we hearing? Elspeth, not ghosts. Pressure memory. Voices impressed on the infrastructure. The Rowans trapped their song in the water system. Technician, and when we opened the house? Elspeth, they started breathing again. She asked to visit the demolished site before the council poured the final concrete. Permission was granted for November 25th. The morning was cold, gray, and there was rain in the air. A security guard named Alan Kerr unlocked the gate for her at 09:00. The ground was uneven, scattered with rebar and broken brick. Steam rose from puddles as if the earth were exhaling. Elspeth carried a small field recorder and a hymnal from St. Malachy's. She placed the recorder on a patch of wet concrete and began to hum the first line of Come Thou Fount. At the 3rd note, the puddles rippled outward. A deep vibration rolled beneath her boots. She stopped singing. The sound continued, hundreds of voices, female, humming the same melody from below. Alan shouted, "What the hell is that?" She whispered, "It's the choir." Then the ground split. Concrete cracked open in a jagged line. Steam gushed upward, smelling of rust and salt. Beneath it, a circular void appeared, a man-made cavity lined with glazed brick, like an old cistern. Inside, half submerged in water, were wooden pews, rotted but recognizable, arranged in a circle around a rusted drain cover. Elspeth lowered her microphone. Voices filled the chamber, women, layered in harmony, singing that same line again and again. Tune my heart to sing thy grace. Her tape later showed the sound lasted exactly 41 seconds, one for each year between the 1953 Vanishing and Lila Hart's arrival. Then silence. She turned to Alan. They built a chapel under the house. Who did? The Rowans. All of them. That night, Elspeth retrieved a soaked notebook from the chamber debris, pages mostly ruined. But one legible line in Bridget Rowan's handwriting remained. The pipes carry them back to the loft. If we stop singing, the water takes us. If we sing too loud, it takes everyone. She faxed the page to the BBC at 21:30. It was the last transmission received from her. Her car was later found parked by Strangford Loft, keys still in the ignition, driver's door open. Fishermen near Portaferry reported unusual tides that same night. The water pulsing inward, then outward, like breathing. One trawler recorded hydrophone audio for scientific curiosity. When analyzed, the frequencies matched the 210 Hz signature of the Ardenlee pipes. But this time the hum carried words. Under the floor we remain. Under the water we wait. At 23:11 p.m., November 26th, several BBC Radio Ulster transmitters experienced a 10-second blackout. During the silence, engineers monitoring the feed heard something faint replace the test tone. A woman's voice singing, perfectly clear, "Come thou fount of every blessing." The transmission log shows no external input. Listeners across County Down phoned in, asking about the hymn break. The BBC denied it aired anything. Sound engineer David McNeil, who had supervised the system that night, later told a colleague, "The voice came through the coolant lines, not the mixer. I could feel it vibrating on the floor." He wrote a short confession before resigning. "The pipes are singing again." "Were the amplifiers." He drowned himself in the leg, and 3 weeks later. The coroner noted his lungs contained fresh water, not river water. On December 2, 1994, Belfast City Council convened an emergency meeting about unexplained acoustic disturbances. Among the minutes, publicly released 2001. Decision: cease all excavation near former Rowan property. Drainage rerouting postponed indefinitely. But one entry was redacted. Under additional notes, someone had typed, then blacked out, a single sentence still faintly visible beneath marker ink. If the song continues, seal the main source. The handwriting below, likely the clerk's. There is no source. On December 5th, archivists attempted to destroy the remaining Ardenlee materials. They placed the cassettes and Polaroids into an incineration bin behind the studio. Security cameras show the bin igniting, then extinguishing itself. Inside, nothing burned. Instead, the metal casing of the tapes had rusted over in a thin layer of condensation. Every surface smelled faintly of seawater. One reel inside was still playable. Its first 30 seconds contained no voices, only water running through pipes. Then, faintly, Bridget, Eileen, Una, followed by a fourth name, Lila. In early 1995, Dr. Cairns's colleagues at Queen's University recreated the frequency in a controlled lab setting, feeding 210 Hz through a sealed metal tube. At precisely 2311, the oscillation shifted, producing spontaneous overtones, harmonics forming a major triad, a humanly impossible pattern without a voice. The tape recorder captured a phrase emerging from the resonance: "Do not let the women sing." Then the equipment exploded, a pipe rupture caused by an internal pressure spike. No one was hurt, but the walls were coated in a thin film of salty water. By the end of 1995, researchers concluded the Rowan song wasn't a haunting. It was a containment system. Each generation of Rowan women had sung the same hymn to keep the resonance from escaping the water table beneath the city. When Bridget died, or disappeared, the melody stopped, and the silence filled with pressure. When Lila reopened the house, she released it. A memo from a government liaison to the BBC, dated February 1996. Summarized, the incident appears linked to long-term seismic acoustic storage beneath the Belfast aquifer. Containment is now self-sustaining through sub-harmonic resonance. No further interference advised. Unofficially, staff called it the singing pressure. 7 years later, when redevelopment finally began on the site, workers discovered a waterproof capsule buried in the new foundation, Elspeth Cairns' field recorder. The tape inside survived. It begins with footsteps on gravel. Then her voice: "If anyone finds this, don't play the song." It's a key. Every note opens the water, a pause, then almost a whisper. It was never haunting. It was a warning. She starts to hum, low, fragile, and the recorder ends in static. In 2020, after heavy storms, several residents of Ardenlee Apartments posted videos online of their bathroom taps vibrating in unison. Each clip captured a low female voice humming through the metal, perfectly in tune. Comments flooded social media, calling it the Rowan sound. The city issued an official explanation: air trapped in pipes. But plumbers who checked the units reported no airlocks, just warm water smelling faintly of salt. One video ends with a child's whisper off camera: "Mummy, she's singing again." Every copy of the hymn "Come Thou Fount" at St. Malachy's Church is now locked in a steel cabinet. Page 33, the marked verse, glued shut. During services, the congregation skips it without comment. Older parishioners glance toward the heating pipes whenever the organ starts. And at 23:11 p.m., if you listen in the quiet of Belfast's night under the hum of the Lagan, you can still hear what they tried to bury: a woman's breath, a rising chord, and a voice saying softly through metal and water, "Not above, under." What happens after the haunting ends? For Belfast, the Rowan story never really ended. 50 years after the family vanished, the voices that once filled a single house now belong to the city itself. moving through drains, radiators, and memory. And for the few who survived investigating the case, the sound never stopped. When the last section of Ardenlee Avenue was rebuilt in 2002, surveyors drilled into the concrete foundation to lay new fiber optic lines. They reported no unusual findings except one: every borehole filled immediately with warm water smelling of salt. Temperature 21 degrees, too warm for groundwater. The crew chief noted in his log, "Pressure rises when we speak above normal volume, as if the ground answers." He sealed the holes, but by the next morning, water had pushed back through the asphalt, tracing thin dark lines shaped like musical staves. In 2003, St. Malachy's Church hosted a memorial for everyone linked to the case: Bridget Rowan, her daughters, Lila Hart, James Delaney, Sarah Lennox, Dr. Elspeth Cairns. The choir refused to sing "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." Instead, they read it aloud as prose, voice by voice. During the reading, witnesses said the heating pipes began to vibrate in unison. Father Connolly recorded his sermon microphone feed, a low hum threading beneath the prayers. When the recording was analyzed later, the hum spelled, by pitch frequency, 4 distinct letters: ROWN. In 2004, a small team at BBC Radio Ulster attempted a respectful retrospective called The Rowan Family, Fact and Folklore. Producer Helen Boyd opened her piece with the line, "Every city has ghosts. Belfast keeps hers in the plumbing." During editing, the studio speakers emitted an unscheduled tone, 210 Hz, while no audio was playing. Technicians froze. The waveform on screen shaped a steady, undulating pattern identical to Bridget Rowan's 1952 soprano test. They abandoned the segment. The BBC filed the incident as equipment interference. The raw data was archived under Rowan residual.wave. No one has dared to play it since. After disappearing for years, Dr. Elspeth Cairns resurfaced in 2008 in a televised interview about acoustic phenomena. She looked older, distant, her hands shaking as she held a mug of tea. When asked what she believed the Rowans had discovered, she said quietly, "Every structure that carries water also carries memory. The Rowans learned to speak to it. They didn't vanish. They resonated." The interviewer pressed her. "Are you saying they're still alive?" "No," she replied. "They're still audible." The program never aired. During post-production, a female humming voice appeared under her dialogue, perfectly tuned to the sound of running water in the studio sink. At 23:11 p.m., April 2, 2011, emergency services responded to reports of singing on the river. Dozens of residents along the Lagan towpath heard a rising chorus coming from the water itself. A jogger recorded 90 seconds on her phone. Analysis showed multiple overlapping female voices repeating one phrase, "not above, under." When divers checked the following day, they found no source, just a circular current spinning silently beneath Queen's Bridge, the exact site where the 1994 frequency had peaked. Environmental officers drained a small section of riverbank. The silt at the bottom carried perfect impressions of small hands. A retired BBC technician, Alan Morrow, wrote a short memoir in 2015. He had handled the Hart tapes before they were sealed. In the final chapter, he confessed, "I still hear the pipes. Moved house 3 times, different systems, same sound, 3 taps, pause, 2. My wife hears nothing. Sometimes I think it's waiting for me to answer." 2 months after publication, he drowned in his bathtub. Water temperature, 21 degrees. Residents of the new flats began noticing condensation forming musical notation on bathroom mirrors. One tenant, Anna McCourt, sent a photo to the Belfast Telegraph. The pattern matched the opening notes of Come Thou Fount. The article went viral. Comments flooded social media. Rowan return. The singing plumbing. Within days, the post was deleted. Anna told friends 2 strangers in council jackets visited, asked her to hand over her phone, and warned, best not to spread old songs. In 2020, postgraduate students at Queen's University Belfast launched an unofficial project titled Urban Resonance Mapping. They placed hydrophones in drains across East Belfast. Every night at 23:11, each sensor picked up a sustained frequency around 210 Hz, increasing if someone nearby spoke or played music. One night they played Come Thou Fount quietly from a phone speaker. The sensors answered. each one emitting harmonics that built a full choral chord. Then all equipment short-circuited, soaked in condensation that smelled faintly of salt and roses. Their final report, suppressed by the university, concluded, "The city hums because it remembers." In 2022, a BBC podcast host tracked down a former parish secretary from St. Malachy's, the same position May Kearns once held. Recording at the church office, the host asked why the hymn was still banned. The woman hesitated, eyes fixed on the radiator beside her. Because every time someone sings it, the pipes join in, and once you hear them, they don't stop. When the podcast team checked the recording later, her last line overlapped with another female voice whispering the same words a half-second behind, as if echoing through metal. Sound engineers confirmed the duplication wasn't electronic feedback. It carried natural reverberation. No one could explain how. In 2023, a minor electrical fire broke out in the BBC Ardenlee Avenue archives. Only one cabinet burned, the shelf containing the Rowan materials. When firefighters opened it, the water inside the hoses steamed. No documents survived, except a single sheet of paper fused to the metal drawer. In the center, typed by mechanical keys, the song holds. The women remain. No one in the building owned a typewriter. By 2024, folklore researchers began calling the case the Rowan resonance. They agreed on one chilling hypothesis. The Rowan women, led by Bridget, used harmony as containment, each note canceling the next, balancing pressure under the city's water. When they disappeared, the silence created a vacuum. Lila Hart's rediscovery restarted the vibration. A Queen's University physicist summarized it in a paper never formally published. The voices are not spirits, but standing waves in the human range, memory converted to sound. Belfast lives above a song, and it still wants to finish its final line. Today, locals barely speak of it. The children who live on Ardenlee Avenue grow up thinking the night tapping is old plumbing. But a few remember the pattern. 3 taps. Pause 2. This year, during a prolonged heat wave, several residents reported their cold water taps running warm, faintly humming as they turned them off. One mobile clip circulated online for a few hours before removal, a clear soprano voice whispering through the faucet, "Tune my heart." Then the feed cut. The clip re-uploaded itself an hour later on multiple accounts. Time-stamped 23:11 p.m., location tag, Strangford Loft. Late one night that same summer, the organ at St. Malachy's switched on by itself. Security cameras showed the keys moving, pressing 3 chords, F, A, C. Each note matched the fundamental frequencies of the old Rowan recordings. The pipes above the altar trembled, dripping water. Maintenance staff swore they heard 3 small voices laughing softly before the sound faded. When the church reopened the next morning, the hymnals on every pew were open to page 33, the verse glued shut 20 years before. The glue had dissolved. Only one direct witness to all 6 investigations remains alive. Former council worker Declan Boyd, now in his 80s. He lives in a care home near Bangor. When interviewed in 2025, he spoke barely above a whisper. People think ghosts wail. They don't. They hum. That's how they remember how to breathe. He looked toward the radiator beside his bed. It was shaking. They don't want revenge, he said. They just want the song finished. Then, under the microphone, the radiator tapped 3 and 2. The most recent unexplained incident occurred May 1st, 2025, at exactly 23:11. Every radio in Greater Belfast, FM and digital, experienced a 5-second dead air gap. Listeners described a low female harmony filling the silence, then a voice whispering one final line. Belfast is still singing. Transmission logs showed no external feed, no engineer on duty. The outage lasted exactly 1953 milliseconds, the year the Rowans disappeared. 72 years have passed since Bridget, Patrick, Eileen, and Una Rowan were last seen at 15 Ardenlee Avenue. The house is gone, but the sound remains. Historians call it folklore. Engineers call it resonance. The rest of Belfast calls it what it's always been, the Rowan secret. No one sings that hymn aloud anymore. Yet on some nights, when the drains swell and the air smells of iron, you can hear the water breathing under the city, steady as a heartbeat. And somewhere inside it, a woman's voice rises, gentle and inevitable. "Do not let the women sing." Then another, younger, answering, "We already did." The city hums once, long and low, and the recording ends.